On this episode of Athletic Training Chat, we have Janell Burkhart, who is an athletic trainer that has gotten to do some really unique things with the profession in terms of traveling around, working with highly underprivileged athletes just in terms of their location and resources and just what that access to someone to help them through their injury really means to them. She's been able to also work with high level athletes in the country, people that come over from different parts of the world that she gets to work with and help them achieve their goals that they're looking to do. So, really unique episode in terms of just the experiences that she has been able to put together and combining that with her faith. It's a cool story, and one that, if this is of some interest to you, she's definitely looking for people to connect with and reach out. So you can check out all her contact information at the end or on the episode page. So excited to share this story with you. As always, we are powered by Mueller Sports Medicine. They continue to help us. We're looking forward to getting a few more of their recovery tubs out through donations that we've been able to achieve and get those out. Already planning for next year, so keep an eye out for that as people are listening. If you have a financial need for it and unable to get them somewhere else, we're hoping we can get several more out in getting ready for next year. But without further ado, please enjoy this episode. Welcome to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We are on with Janell Burkhart, who is an athletic trainer who works with a lot of very high-end athletes, which has afforded her some unique opportunities to travel internationally. We got connected through a Mueller rep, thanks John, but it has taken us the better part of probably a year to get this set for a variety of reasons. But here we are getting it recorded. But it's from what John shared, and then just, as we've been going back and forth, some of the opportunities that you've had has been super interesting, and just kind of a unique part of the athletic training profession, a unique job within it. So I'm glad we got to connect on this. But before we get too much further in, just wanted to turn it over to you to share some of your background and kind of how you ended up where you are.
Yeah, thanks so much, Joel. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today and the listeners. And as far as the delay, it's been a fun time getting to know you through the email threads.
Right.
Have also had the chance to be in some countries in South Asia for a few weeks that delayed our conversations, as well as I was in Cameroon, Africa a couple weeks ago. So traveling all over has made it difficult to keep up with all the emails. But it's so great to be here, and wanted to just share a little bit about my background and how I got connected with these opportunities. So I got my bachelor's in exercise science at North Dakota State University and my master's in athletic training as well from there. I've been doing clinical rotations throughout grad school, and then that brought me to a summer internship. Being able to serve as a strength and conditioning coach as well as an athletic training student with a sports ministry organization called Athletes in Action. So that opportunity really kind of opened my eyes and felt divinely inspired and called to pursue this unconventional setting of really not just settling for working for a D2 or D3 college the rest of my life like I thought I might as an AT, but realizing that us as ATs can have a greater global impact. Would have never really realized that God had given me these talents and training, as well as this passion to reach people through athletic training. And so I finished school, did a sports science internship with a hospital right out of school, focused on biomechanics and running, and then took a job with an NAIA football team just to be sure to keep my skills up while preparing to move to Ohio. And then COVID cut that short a little bit. So I did some ambulance work in rural North Dakota where I was raised. And now post-COVID, became a leader in charge of myself and now a growing team of collaborators. As a fresh young professional, helped grow a new facility, a first weight room, and now a growing sports performance department, with hoping to open a larger facility here in March of 2024.
They've done just a couple things, is what you're saying.
Just a couple.
um, so what exactly, do you do in your role, more recently, and how is it unique to some of the other settings that you've seen or been a part of, or obviously just, knowing people that have gone to, in a bunch of different settings so far in your career?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel really blessed to work with a team that we partner with to focus on providing opportunities for athletes who might not otherwise have access to either training or connections, relationships, open doors, or just expanding their career. So a lot of the athletes that we work with could be local athletes that just need some sports performance training off season or in season. Maybe some domestic athletes around the US, the college or off-season pro wanting some training, or we really do focus in on opening up doors for international athletes. So we don't want the training to be just a destination. We want it to be a part of an athlete's journey. And so whether they work with us between high school and college, and then after college when they're trying to seek pro, or however, we're not trying to be just a destination academy, but want to continue those relationships with our athletes personally as coaches and athletic trainers, and however we can be of assistance to them virtually or in a hybrid setting along their journey. And so one quick story that can represent one of the athletes we worked with, and just some of the opportunities that these athletes could have includes, so there's this boy from India who's 5'8". He was actually a national champion basketball player, and he wanted to seek playing basketball pro in another country. So he came to the US and he began training with our team in 2018 after training virtually for a season. Spent about a year training here, and then got a scholarship to play basketball at an NAIA school in the US. Got his American education, and now he's actually playing pro basketball in Australia, as well as continuing to train and inspire the next generation of athletes in India. And so there's sport-specific opportunities to train, sports performance opportunities, residential teams in like a summer league baseball team, summer league soccer, prep gap year basketball team, and then pre-combine and pro day football training, as well as individuals. We really enjoy working with these individuals that have their own goals and initiatives, and helping them reach those opportunities.
So in like that specific case of, your example, is that something like, did he personally pay his way to come over and be a part of this, or is it part of a larger, is it a scholarship or a kind of grant based thing, or it could be obviously some combination of, but with all the different, countries, nationality, all the different, collecting of people, how does that work, if you don't mind?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah. So there's always the opportunity for athletes to pay their way, but as we've shared, that we look to create opportunities for those who might not otherwise have them. That often means that they can be from a lower socioeconomic status, or just a country that doesn't have the resources that the US does. So we look to find a network of people that could financially offer scholarships to these athletes, whether it's the coaching staff that really wants to recruit this athlete if they're looking for sponsors, or otherwise there's sometimes federations from the local countries, governing bodies that are able to help sponsor, or other outside organizations. So it's come across in multiple different directions. And honestly, I'm not sure exactly what the process that that athlete that I talked about used, but yeah, there's multiple different ways of those who really are dedicated to wanting to improve physically, that, yeah, they can find different ways to get across to us.
Gotcha. Appreciate that little insight. I think one of the things that was really the most interesting is the international aspect to it. We've talked on this podcast in previous episodes. I will go look up which one it is, to a couple of athletic trainers that worked or were involved in the Asian Pacific Athletic Trainers Society, and how that started up and what they did over there and everything. So obviously there's ATs kind of doing things international, but what has been your involvement in the international experiences that you've had?
Yeah, so even just off the bat, as I think about it, those that have come to the athletic training facility locally, I've seen over 10 countries represented in athletes that have come to train, and examples like I just shared. As well as over the last couple of years, I've been able to go on a couple international trips, one of which I recently returned from Cameroon, Africa. It was a clinic trip, some education for local track coaches. When I was there, I taught about injury prevention to coaches, and then also realized just the limited access that they had, whether it was to physios or medical doctors that really had no understanding of the demands of sport. And that even if they did have access, like the general population and the athletes didn't have as many physios to reach, or maybe the funds to be serviced by one. But seems basically in the end of the day, the coach is fully responsible for, or the athletes themselves, for their care for their sports injuries. And so that really burdens my heart to see that maybe an ACL or a labrum or a fracture could ultimately end an athlete's athletic career in many of these countries. And we're not just talking about third world underdeveloped countries. This can be many different places across the board. So that was my experience in Africa. And then being able to travel as well with teams to South Asia, to different countries in South Asia, to be the athletic training coverage for US athletes that travel, as well as we're reaching communities in those areas. So when we were in the Maldives earlier this year, I had an opportunity to share with coaches and young leaders about injury prevention alongside a beach volleyball camp that we were doing. And so we talked a bit about injury prevention. The talk just continued to morph into actually a discussion about leadership and impact and influence that local athletes and coaches could have. And there's the situation that put a tear in nearly everybody in the room's eye as a 12-year-old girl spoke up and was vulnerable about how she had been feeling. Like, what worth did she have to influence anyone's life as a young leader, and her insecurities. And in their culture, it's not very common to the male-female relationship is even more probably male-dominated culture than we might see in America. And so one of our male American coaches kind of bent down, looked eye to eye with this 12-year-old girl in front of everybody, and just simply basically told her, hey, used her name, like, Susie, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are loved. And we just all sat in that. And so seeing that sport as a platform might open doors for opportunities to build relationships with people everywhere. But then also seeing just the impact of how we can care for one another and build trust and relationships and care for people and the whole person, not just their physical needs.
Definitely. That's awesome on the leadership aspect of it all. I've had a few instances, not for traveling internationally, but not to actually work with any athletes. It was to basically do some teaching, taping. Yes, I got paid to go teach tape in a different country.
That's perfect.
Yeah, I know. It's just so nuts because like we take it so for granted as like second nature for us, taping an ankle and some of these other things and whatnot. But anyway, just like the connections you get to make with like a lot of people I was talking to were physiotherapy students or just recently new, and just that was such a cool experience. And that because you do something so different, they're just interested in what you do. It also helped that I stuck out like a sore thumb where I was, because I was a lot taller and bigger than most people. So throw that into the mix.
Yeah, well, and that plays a big role. I think so many times it can go both ways. Americans can come in thinking that they have something to offer and, oh, we have it all figured out in America, and whatever you're doing, how can like have a bit of that dominant, or I don't know, just a mentality that can be a little bit overbearing. And then there's also both ways. There could be other countries that look to, oh, well, America's got it all going on, like you guys got it figured out, it's like whatever we can learn from you. And so it does open doors for like influence and notoriety, but we really want to focus in on when we travel to places that we're finding local key partners and championing them, coming alongside them, supporting them, and trying to evade any of our thoughts of that we haven't figured out, because there's so many different ways that other countries do healthcare differently than we do and can be better. It's not necessary, it's just different. It's not necessarily that, you know, the way that we do things, evidence-based, science-based, however. And so feel blessed to live in America myself, but being able to create those relationships across countries, and so glad that sports and medicine both being kind of universal languages that we can use our skills to experience other cultures and meet other people and learn different things from them. And like, for example, when I was in Africa and we were talking about just like how we take it for granted, simple taping.
Sure.
I had just shared at this coaches clinic with a bunch of track coaches, and was able to get connected to, just through WhatsApp, wasn't even able to meet him in person, but gets connected to a guy who leads 15 PT clinics across the country of Cameroon. He also just started a bachelor's program for physiotherapy a couple of years ago. And as soon as he heard about me, he was like shooting off offers like, hey, can you teach this entire course on tape or on sports for my program starting next spring? And so there's definitely opportunities internationally, different platforms of education. I'm really personally wanting to figure out a pathway of how we can use the digital era, and not just in-person taping clinics, even though those relationships are really valuable,
Right.
To build those in person, but how can we continue to build on that momentum through digital platforms of connecting with people, and even the networks of kind of finding the right people that are at the top of certain topics within our profession, and using that network to feed into creating awareness in other countries and their needs and their questions. So once we figure out the strategy of the country and their needs in education, how can we build a pathway? This is just me dreaming right now, but how can we build a pathway to either, whether it is coming to the States, getting a credential in AT, and then going back and serving their country, or even just a pathway for continuing education for current physios to get more sports understanding, or all of that. I'm not sure where it might go next, but that's kind of what's burdening my heart right now. And also completely inspired by there's a couple girls that I've gotten connected to through these initiatives, and two young women in Asia. Both are the only ATs in their country, and the only women leaders in their men's sports organizations. So I don't know if you heard me there, but there's two young professionals, women from their countries, went and pursued AT education in another country, and then came back to serve their people. And they're both working in multiple different settings because everyone wants them and needs them. And they're both also working with men's national teams, one in basketball, one in cricket. So people like this are my hero, and I want to come alongside those and, open doors for them however I can. So.
Yeah, I think if I got to go back, I said this, and then COVID happened shortly after I had done traveling, and then life has come at me with a couple young kids now. So going for 2 weeks at a time isn't a great option in my world right now, but hopefully in the future. But just getting to go and like observe some of the physiotherapists in their realm over there, just to see what they do and how they do it, and what could I pick up from that I just had never thought of because I didn't look at it that way. I think is what I would love to be able to do if I get the opportunity again.
Wow. Well, that's really, yeah. Here, hit us up. Let us know if
Yeah,
you're
no
wanting to
kidding.
go.
No kidding.
Yeah. That leads me into, I wanted to mention that, as I kind of hit on before, but we want to use sport as that platform or that universal language, and then build relationships with athletes, coaches, or support staff to meet either tangible or intangible needs, whatever their strategy or whatever their needs are, but really concerned about the whole person, their needs, not just their physical performance needs, but also mental and spiritual, and via different platforms and strategies. And personally inspired by a guy who's an Olympic champion back in the day, and he was competing with the freedom of his identity not being rooted in his performance, but just being able to play free and know that whatever happened. And he was sharing about how his faith had offered him that freedom with his opponents around the world as he got connected to people, as he competed against different people in different championships and in the Olympics, people from across the world. So maybe maybe this seems like an uncommon strategy or a setting to you, but if you're interested at all in kind of what we're doing, I would love for you listeners to reach out. We have opportunities for students in immersive rotations in the spring and summer semesters, for young professionals, either 1 or 2 year kind of GA style positions to experience a different setting and get hands-on experience, as well as for anyone who's interested in a short or a long-term volunteer or staff position joining our team. International experiences in education or inpatient care for traveling U.S. athletes, or domestic colleges and youth camps.
You heard it. If there's things you want to check out, we'll get you contact information at the end of the podcast here, as we always do. You've referenced it multiple times, meeting people where they are, figuring out their goals, what resources they have, but also, going beyond just the physical aspect of sport. So how is focusing on the athlete beyond that helped, from what you've seen, help athletes achieve their goals? And then how has that impacted you, which you've also sort of touched on as we've been going, but now I ask you to really hone it in on both of those.
Yeah, well, that's the most important part, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, to start off, was just so wholesome to work with an athlete, as seeing them as a person first and building those relationships. I think of so many times as athletic trainers, regardless of setting that we're in, we have such an opportunity to build those relationships and trust. Like, we can be some of the first people that an athlete comes to when they broke up with their girlfriend or boyfriend, or if they're just not confident in their injured joint. It plays a huge role in their performance and their overall health if their mind isn't in it, or if there's challenges at home or things that they're focused on otherwise. I think, imagine if any of us were in an athlete's shoes and thinking of the circumstances that I've been discussing, just as they're getting settled into a new environment across the world, totally different than any cultural norms that they grew up with. And there's logistical adaptations required to getting settled in the US. They're probably a bit more unsettled by meeting their basic needs than they are about even focusing on preventing injury as they start their program or training. So athletes really do need to be thriving personally before they can be successful on the court or on the field. And nowadays, I think we're seeing more and more like people's mental health and challenges of post-pandemic world or whatever it is, like politics, everything's affecting people. So we're all people that consist of a physical, a mental, and a spiritual component, and also how that impacts our social interactions too. But if any of these needs aren't being met, just like our basic needs for, including sleep and nutrition and hydration, that being a physical need, if any of these needs are being met, there's disruption that affects our overall health and livelihood, as well as athletic performance. And so my real goal is just to come alongside the athletes or coaches or anyone else in our network, to be able to care for all of their health related needs, whether it be for something from my skill set or referring them appropriately to meeting the needs that they have, as I recognize that through the trust and relationship that we have. But having that initial relationship, to being able to recognize those needs early on, is really important before it becomes something that can be really detrimental. So just like catching a tendonitis before it turns into a long-term muscle strain or a stress fracture, being able to recognize those mental, insecurities that could later turn into something more. So removing or ignoring any of these components really removes an aspect of who that person is and their health. And so even if someone outwardly doesn't consider or identify themselves as spiritual in cultural terms, they still have a soul, they still have spiritual health or unhealth. And I just want to love on those around us, those that I have impact on, to do the best that I can to love them as Jesus would love on them. And to be there for the needy, to listen to the hurting athlete, to caring for the lonely or confused, or however fill in the blank. But it's just such a great opportunity that we have as ATs everywhere to be there for our athletes when they're healthy and before they're unhealthy, and then help them feel seen and loved. Oftentimes it doesn't matter what you know about their injury, the care and the time that you spend with them could really speak volumes more.
So this is a kind of a loaded question. We can definitely pull it out afterwards if you want. You can let me know. But I just, you mentioned all the things going on in the world. We're recording this in late October for whenever this comes out, and if you paid attention to the news at all, there's obviously some very bad things happening in the world, and hopefully they don't get worse. Um, but even on the ones like you mentioned, going to Cameroon, and some of the things that you see there, and what how an ACL can ruin. How do you personally kind of work through that? Knowing that you're coming there for a short time.
Mhm.
Obviously, I've gotten to know you through email and just our short conversation, but wanting to make a positive impact and the things that you just said, but knowing that you're again going to only be there for so long, and obviously I don't know your personal finances, but you might not be an athletic trainer if you were pulling in that kind the kind of money that you could literally just like send over a bunch and really you
Yeah,
make a significant
yeah,
fiscal difference over there, if you kind of get where I'm going with
for
that.
sure.
How do you kind of work through that? Because I know it would be, for me personally, that would be really hard. And even going on some of these international trips, just seeing some of the differences in the worlds and how people make it through and survive, as you were saying. I'm going to stop rambling now. If you would be open to answering that question.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways I could take that. I think coming in just with a heart posture of learning and understanding people's real felt needs as opposed to maybe what I might perceive their needs to be, whether
Oh,
it's fiscally or otherwise.
sure,
And then trying not to personally feel the burden of meeting every one of those needs, but how can I come alongside them, encourage them, love on them through their challenges that they're facing, even if I tangibly can't meet their needs. Or if I can, how can I connect them to the right people that can help? Or
sure.
maybe it is something that I physically can help with, and so wanting to step into that and foster that well. But I think that's true. There's so many times, especially if traveling to a third world country, that if you experience kind of more of a reverse culture shock when you return home than the culture shock initially when you got there, because of realizing how far an American dollar can go in someone else's lives, or just how much we take for granted in our comfort in our daily lives when others might not know where their next meal is going to come from, or safety, or however. So yeah, I think the best answer I have for is loving on someone that how I would, not just how I would want to be loved, but knowing that I can provide that love and support through how I would want to receive it, but then also figuring out what their perceived method of feeling loved is, tangibly or intangibly. And for me, that is through my relationship with Jesus, and knowing that I can root my identity in who He says I am because of what the Bible says about how He uh, sees me as perfect because of the sacrifice that He provided. I won't go into a whole, everything that gospel says right now, but
Sure.
just gets me thinking about being a sinful human, and being an imperfect person, and how God provided that sacrifice, and to be able to take on the identity of His perfect Son as opposed to being the imperfect sinful person that I am. And so the daily forgiveness and the daily grace that He offers and provides me, and so just the freedom that I get to live with that identity of the God of the universe sees me as perfect, and that I don't need to strive to be perfect myself.
I appreciate that. Anything else that we haven't covered kind of around the work that you've been able to do so far, and are currently doing, before we jump into the AT chat questions?
Let's see. Another story that I'd like to share that just inspires me, that from my time in Cameroon. I've been in contact with an athlete since early to 2023, I guess. So just about a little over 9 months, maybe. Been in contact virtually and through relationships that I had on the ground in Cameroon. And this athlete, has a dream of playing professionally and inspiring the next generation. And we'd been in contact about how we can help. Like you said, that there's, I might not be able to give him all the money that he needs, or the facilities or equipment that he might need, but how can I at least show that I support him through offering something from my skill set, whether it's a consult over the phone or some treatment, however. So while I was in Cameroon, then I messaged him and just said, I don't know if it's going to be feasible or not, but would love to meet you in person. So this guy, he's about 20-year-old basketball athlete. He lives in the middle of a civil war, like active civil war situation where his hometown is. And he hopped on an overnight bus, escaped from that Civil War area when their fighting wasn't quite as bad the one day the week that I was there, and took that overnight bus and then waited for me to wake up in the morning so that I'd be able to spend the day with him and get to know him as a person, connect him to the people that I was, currently working with while we were on the ground there, but then also offering just some really minor treatment. I had brought like a little miniature massage gun and had some bands, a lacrosse ball, and just helped kind of love on his body by like helping do some treatment, some recovery techniques, and then taught him about how he could be doing some rehab exercises based on some limitations or imbalances that I noticed. So being able to connect him with local relationships is probably going to be more valuable than the one thing I could do the one day that I was there. And it's not like I'm moving to Africa necessarily, but then how can we maintain that relationship through virtual platforms or through the people that are able to help him on the ground there. So just an inspiring story that I got to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that one in the notes and was wondering if we would circle back to that one because it seemed pretty incredible. Well, with that, ready for the AT chat questions?
Let's do it.
So where do you see athletic training going in the next 5 to 10 years? And that could be kind of more specific or very general, however you would like to take it.
Yeah, I think my dream at least is to see like globally, it's probably not in the next 5 to 10 years, but a global awareness, and that ultimately the aim that I'm looking for is seeing a day that every athlete has adequate access to health in their sport. So I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not necessarily saying that means every athlete has a personal AT they can go to at all times, but how can our profession grow globally? Whether it's right now just through awareness of there's a profession out there that focuses on this, or our own awareness of what the perceived needs are globally for athletes, but just that everyone has a chance to not have a labrum take them out of the rest of their career and dreams.
What advice would you give yourself as a young athletic trainer, and if you could go back and say like when that advice would be given?
Yeah, I think probably right out of school, a lot of times I saw it myself and also the students that I work with now, that we focus so much on getting the right answers, whether it's a diagnosis or whether it's answering the athlete's questions or giving them the right treatment plan and everything. And that is all very important, but sometimes the athlete might not care as much about all of the medical jargon and all the details as much as they would feel cared and loved by just spending an extra 5 minutes listening to them and their needs. And so I think the pressure that I felt to make sure that I had all the right answers and looked smart in front of my athletes and everything like that, as opposed to just helping them feel like I'm a trustworthy person that they can come to. And then that's really opened up more opportunity to treat them better than me just answering their questions at the highest level of evidence-based answers that I could come up with. So again, value to both of that, but I would say to myself, spend the extra 5 minutes and listen to them.
I like that one. What is the most influential resource you have found in your career?
I would say simply relationships, whether that's those who've gone before me as preceptors, mentors, professors. And I could list off just hundreds of people that I think of, like how we're all as athletic trainers basically just the product of so many others' experiences, especially our preceptors and our professors, but then as time goes on, our network and those we get connected to. So wanted to throw in a little unsolicited plug to, I'm really inspired by the father of function, Dr. Gary Gray, and what he's building out in the Gray Institute, because they provide ongoing, like, continuing education through short and long-term forms virtually, and just have a really fundamental understanding of movement science that can complement movement professionals' understanding, whether that's a coach, an athletic trainer, or a strength coach. But just how we can kind of reframe how we think about functional movement and how that can benefit our athletes' rehab programs, or as a coach, their training programs. So just as I say, relationships, that one came to mind.
Absolutely. As an AT in your role, how do you take care of yourself?
That's a good question.
I'm glad you
um,
added that one in.
yeah. So I think as much as that might be a hypocrisy answer, but learning how to set healthy boundaries and stand up for myself. And I think it really has been, the more that I might think I'd be okay pushing through, or maybe I do think I'm good at setting boundaries in certain ways, the more that I've been involved in different aspects of the role, the more I've learned that it's something that we really need to make sure that we take care of ourselves first, because athletic trainers generally are bent towards making sure they're putting everyone else's needs above their own. And I see that in myself, and I've always took that as well, it's good, I think of others before myself, but ultimately you can't help other people if you don't put your oxygen mask on first. If you run out into the football active play and the scene isn't safe, you're not able to help the athlete who's on the ground. So thinking of that in the whole person way too, being able to care for myself physically, mentally, spiritually, having the right relationships in my life, of a network of friends and solid family, and just having those people that can help look out for me, but then being sure that I'm putting my needs first and standing up for myself when I know that, I need something, I need help from a supervisor or from my husband or however else. So just being able to be honest and vulnerable about where you need help and setting healthy boundaries.
Seems to be a common theme when we ask that question. If you could change or eliminate one thing, could be a modality, a common practice, a mindset, or anything of your choosing in the field of athletic training, what would it be?
Yeah, this might be a little bit biased answer because I'm in a setting where I have the opportunity to think this way, and I know there's many settings that this wouldn't work, but I think as much as we're able to, as athletic trainers, whatever setting that we're in, as much as we're able to spend that one-on-one time with athletes. And so I really appreciate valuing manual therapies over other modalities that, you might be able to serve more athletes at one time. And I understand that's necessary in many settings. And thankfully, I don't feel that pressure that I need to serve a whole football team, in 1 hour, because you're not able to care for the athlete's physical needs as well as building those relationships as well in those settings. There's other ways that athletic trainers can do that, but I think even though it might be unrealistic in the busy world of tight schedules and a job surplus right now in our field, as much as we're able to spend that one-on-one time with an athlete and figure out how we can do that in our setting, and then laying a hand on them, I think has such just a powerful connection point, as opposed to a tool, just a personal touch, and really being able to intently listen to how they're doing, how their day's been going, what they're needing. More, to me, feels more beneficial to them than hooking 10 guys up to a stim and ultrasound and then sitting on their computer and doing documentation. So I know it's necessary. There's not enough of us to go around. But...
Sure. No, I get it. Last one is, what does being an athletic trainer mean to you?
Ultimately, I'm in this profession to care for the whole person, that is mentally, spiritually, and physically, showing them love, however they receive it best, not necessarily how I might be inclined to provide it.
I like it. That last part I like a lot, and just making sure that you're understanding what they want and meeting them where they are. I like that part. If people wanted to connect with you, follow you, see what you're doing, I haven't followed you on Instagram yet, but I will. About how if you post on all your travels and whatnot, what would be the best place to do that?
Yeah, right now the best place to contact me would be through Instagram. I'm at JK Burkhart. That's JKBURKART. Feel free to send me a message and follow me. It's set up as a personal profile, not necessarily a professional profile, but that'd be the best way to get a hold of me for now and also kind of see what I'm doing in life. And then as we get connected, would love to talk more about how anyone who might be interested in being involved in some level or another with what I'm doing. So
That sounds great. Appreciate your patience and I'll say both of our tenacity to make this happen, and that it didn't get completely lost. I think I was the first one to not respond for months on end, and then we just kind of traded back and forth. So um, we're good to go there. But it was a pleasure to get to meet you and have the conversation, and appreciate the work you're doing and for sharing it.
thanks so much, Joel. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you today and your listeners, and inspired by you and making this podcast. So thanks so much for this opportunity.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Athletic Training Chat. We hope you enjoyed it. Got to hear about another kind of unique aspect of athletic training and the opportunities that it can present to you. You never know what you might be able to do within the profession, so we hope that is something that you took away. If you haven't checked out the Athletic Training Daily Journal, please do. It's at the clinicallypressed.org shop for a 14-day trial, or you can find it on Amazon. 50% of all proceeds go directly into funding those cold tubs we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, and the other 50% is just to help continue to build out the platform and get to a place of hopefully critical mass here where we can really step up our donation game. So we're looking forward to that. Appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next episode.